Welcome to Choose the Nickel. I am your host, George Bailey. My co-founder and technical support is the ever-talented, ever-beautiful Christina Bailey. This podcast is about giving kids financial freedom. My wife and I love our 4 children and want to learn to prepare them more effectively for the adult world. So we're interviewing fascinating people for their insights about how children learn to be financially savvy. Our guests come from diverse, sometimes conflicting schools of thought, and we love the opportunity to learn from them. We encourage listeners everywhere to weigh our guests' ideas on how best to cultivate in children a healthy relationship with money. We invite you to visit our blog at www.choosethenickel.com, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our efforts to apply what we are learning on the podcast. This episode of Choose the Nickel features former Missouri Governor Bob Holden. Governor Holden was treasurer of the state of Missouri from 1993 to 2001 and then served until 2005 as the state's governor. Since completing his political career, Governor Holden has focused on working to increase public understanding of the impact of globalization on the Midwest and what the Midwest needs to do to maintain its influence in the world economy. He is the founder of the Holden Public Policy Forum at Webster University and is an advisory board member for Webster University's School of Communications. He serves as chairman of the Midwest U.S.-China Association, which encourages commerce between 12 states in the Midwestern United States and China. Governor Holden graduated from Southwest Missouri State University with a degree in political science. He also completed coursework for government executives at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. We're excited to have him on the show and hope that you enjoy his thoughts and stories. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Bob Holden. Governor Holden, welcome to the show.
Okay.
The Holden Public Policy Forum. What can you tell me about that?
Mike Huckabee was my first speaker.
Really?
When I had the program. Yeah, I had Eagle Bud Crow was a guest. We had several. I helped bring Nancy Pelosi, the U.S. Speaker, and give commencement at Webster while I was there. Wynton Marsalis, brought him to Webster.
Wow. Okay, I'm jealous. Now, they're like Wynton Marsalis. You know, I really love jazz, and he's like, you know, one of the people at the top of the
and
list.
Deserves to be at the top.
He's incredible.
Well, he's a class act.
He is. Yeah, and you know, whenever I watch him interact with kids and what he's trying to do for jazz restoration, or in terms of like kind of bringing it to their consciousness, that guy, he's inspiring. So that's really cool.
And you know what? He's just as nice as he is inspiring. I mean, I've had the opportunity now to interact with him 2 or 3 times. In fact, my wife would tell the story that throughout our marriage, we've had 3 different sets of rescue dogs. And the latest one we have, it's Mick Jagger and Wynton Marsalis.
Those dogs could not be more different than they are. I'll tell you, that's the wow. You also helped bring about the Missouri Most program. What can you tell me about that? What inspired that?
Well, that in my dollars and cents program too were done when I was state treasurer of Missouri, and I led the effort on the Most program. And it really comes back from my time as a young person. Most people know that I come out of rural Missouri. My family were farmers. My dad had tried to go to college, but his parents didn't believe that education was important, so they didn't help him. He ended up not being able to make it, went in the military, got tested out at 140 plus IQ. But all I always remember is he just wanted his children to go to college. He didn't care where we went, what we majored in, or anything else. And about 6th, 7th, 8th grade, my mom and dad started giving me an allowance of 25 cents a week, with the idea that 10 cents of that was to go to the local bank for my college education fund. And so from that premise, when I had the opportunity under the 529 program to take a look at it, we designed ours truly unique. In fact, it was identified as one of the 5 best in the United States because we set it up so that people could start saving for as little as $25 a time. And it was flexible about, if you had 2 or 3 kids, you could move the money around. And as long as you used it for educational purposes, that would be fine.
And so to be clear, a 529 is basically an investment vehicle where you can place money where it's non-taxable as long as it is used for educational purposes.
Exactly.
Got it.
And one of the unique differences, most programs, they like to start out with requirements like you've got to have $500 or $1,000 and you make it in increments. Well, that misses a whole strata of our economy.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to make it so that any family that truly wanted to help their children could do so. And I thought $25 was a pretty small investment to get started. Because if they could start and do $25 a month when the child comes home from the birth, and they do that all the way up through 18 years of time, that person is that age, they build up quite a bit of money to pay for the education. In fact, our two sons, both of them, had got most of their housing and everything else paid for by the little bit of money we put in from my state treasurer days and governor days.
I like the idea that we take people and encourage them to just be consistent in saving. Mm-hmm. Consistency, if you've got someone who's able to save a lot, but is a little bit sporadic, and then you've got that person who's consistent, but just only putting away a little at a time, they will do an impressive amount of savings over time. And it's amazing how that snowballs.
And it does snowball. And I've tried to encourage a lot of the hospitals as part of the package that they give the parents when they leave to sign the child up and put the first $25 into that account.
So they're subsequently thinking of their birth and the cost of their college.
Yeah, exactly.
Got that. That's great. Give them that start. I like that.
Well, and the thing is, it really comes back to when I set up the dollars and cents program. Philosophically, both of them are the same. My sense is people are willing to save if they've got a vision of what they're saving for.
Yes.
And so we set up a program where the teachers put together the program. The banks would come in and collect pennies and the dimes and whatever from the students to set up an account in their bank for the student. And then the teacher could use math and all of her or his discussions on the $10 they needed for the ball glove or the dress or whatever they wanted to have. And so you could develop real tangible objects of success.
I've always thought that math would be best served by contextualizing it in money and finance, because it's fascinating. Math, independently, and this is not to be hard on math teachers, but independently, it's great stuff, but not for everybody. But I tell you, you put a dollar sign on basically any mathematical equation that makes it at least 10 times more interesting. Did you get bankers to actually come in? How did that work?
Bankers were very much engaged because they realized that looking at it from a parent standpoint, all those that have children know that if your children are playing soccer, you're going to have an interest in soccer because you're going to be going to the games. If your kids are interested in theater or music, you're going to pick up those. And the same thing with if a child's bank account is in Bank X over here, sooner or later, probably that family may be starting to put more money from the family standpoint in that bank.
I just keep on thinking to myself, well, how do you make a bank more exciting? So they're going to have to keep on working on that. Because, there may be some kids out there who there's the kids who love being at a baseball game and that's what inspires them to do sports. And then there's those kids who just love banks and just being in a bank is like, oh my goodness,
But if that child is interested,
I want to beat that child.
if that child is interested in sports and plays baseball, then what the teacher can do is break. Okay, the baseball glove costs you $15.
Yeah,
if you put down $1 a week, how long it's going to take you to get to the $15 so you'll have the money to be able to buy the baseball.
So let's basically attach all the exciting stuff to the bank, and then the bank's a party.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
Because, that's still a little bit of a dilemma. No offense to my banker friends, and I've got plenty, but bringing a kid into a bank is just like,
But you know what? The feedback I got from the banks, they were very happy.
Oh, yeah. No doubt. I love that because there are so many unbanked, and you want to give them exposure. Like, look, this is a trustworthy institution. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's FDIC backed. They may not know what that means, but whatever.
And the thing is, in every area of education, the teachers need to think outside the box a little bit and think about, okay, how do we design our educational program to where we engage intellectually that student at whatever age?
Yes.
I'll give you another example. I was invited to a school in Jefferson County when I was governor to watch a play that the students had been working on. And so I attended it, and it was a play about Missouri. They took the history of Missouri all the way from the Indians and the first explorers all the way up to the time of my governorship in Missouri. And I was talking with a couple of the students afterwards and congratulated them on, it was really a neat play. And I asked one of them, I said, well, I know you're supposed to be studying your Missouri history. How you coming? And this little girl said, well, Governor, we haven't spent a lot of time studying Missouri history. We've been working on this play all semester long. And I went home to Lori, my wife, and I said, those kids know more about Missouri than 99% of the people in the state of Missouri. Because the teacher was bright enough to take all the historical facts and information and put that into a mechanism that the students, those young people could relate to and get enjoyment out of it.
It's very challenging to make money real, but I do agree with you. I think that it's possible. I like the connections that you're making. Tell me a little bit more about the dollars and cents program. Is that separate from the Missouri's Most? I've never been sure how those relate.
It is separate. Both of them were under the same premise, so to speak. It's to try to design what I would think are good economic actions, but make them attractive enough that people want to participate. Because if you talk to a young person, say, we want you to put $5 in the bank so it'll grow, that's not very exciting. But if you can talk about the $5 you put in the bank, here's what you can do with it, here's what you can buy for it, or here's what you can put another $5 and save for it. And so it starts connecting why money is important, why it's valuable, and why you need to plan and think ahead. So if you want something that's going to cost $25, but you can only put in $5 at a time, you don't spend that $5 each time. You put it in the bank, get it up to the $25, so you'll have it to buy the thing that you're really wanting. It helps try to set priorities in young people's minds of what is the most important thing, what is the most valuable thing that I want to spend my money on.
Yes.
Not just the next thing that comes along, the track and that buying that soda or that ice cream bar. Save it and put it to something that has more lasting benefit.
That training, and I do think that it takes conscious training of countering immediate gratification, can be a really big deal. Going back to your childhood, you said you were born in Missouri, you were raised on a farm, but in the Ozarks, right? Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit about that farm? I just describe it for me. Tell me, because I don't even know what a farm is, actually.
Well, my brothers would tell you that I don't know much about a farm either, because I wasn't so much of a farmer. I couldn't have had better parents, better opportunity. My grandfather, my uncle, and my dad all farmed on the same land. My grandfather had been presiding commissioner in the county, so they had a sizable amount of land, but it wasn't like in the Boot Hill, really good land. Probably 80% of it was rocks and trees, and about 200 acres of it is what they used for their hay, their grains, their all the things they fed the cattle and that type of thing. And so my dad had dairy cows, hogs, and beef cattle. When I left the farm to go to college, he sold the dairy cows. When my brothers left the farm to go to college, he sold the hogs and still had a cow and calf operation. But where I come from, and it's hopefully why I've always been so sensitive about my approach to things. I'll never forget one time we'd been sent to bed. My mom and dad were going over the taxes, and their question was, did they make enough money this year to be above the poverty line? And poverty in rural America is different than poverty in urban America. I mean, and we were considered probably one of the better well-off families in the community. One of the nicest compliments a student gave a reporter one time was that Bob was the only person in my class that didn't make fun of the holes I had in my pants. It just gets you to be sensitive and caring and thoughtful about everybody. and what you should be doing. That, I think, is hopefully reflective of what I tried to do as governor of the state of Missouri and state treasurer of Missouri, is put together programs so that if people were really committed to bettering themselves, there would be an avenue for that to occur.
Yeah. I like what you're saying about kindness in terms of how it would play into your success later on, because I feel like if you teach your children about money but not kindness, that can be really detrimental for them. But if you teach them about kindness, I think that it really, I don't know, it gives purpose to what they're doing, the good that they're doing later on. So any lessons about finance and whatnot early on has to be complemented by good moral behavior, kindness, being, generous and whatnot. I've interviewed another successful business person, Gary Kelman, who also was a farmer in his youth, but his experience, it sounds like it was a little bit different because, whereas he said, man, this thing, I worked and blah, 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 but you seem to allude that your brothers, kind of thought that maybe you got off easy a little bit.
It wasn't as much got off easy because I put in the time.
Yeah, okay. See, that's I suspected as much because you don't strike me as somebody who's a slacker.
Working on a farm helped me politically because nobody could outwork me. But what my brothers talk about is I never had any real interest in staying on the farm.
So it just wasn't in your kind of ambition, your vision.
No, I mean, I did all the work, but my vision in life was not to take over the farm. My brother, who is a judge, does some farming on the land, and we've got some cousins that do some. But my interest was other places. And the good thing is my parents didn't try to change that. The only thing they ever wanted from all of us is that we went to college because it's something my dad had wanted to do, and his family didn't support it.
Was it more because he thought that your prospects afterwards would be better, or was it more because of just the idea of a universal education, one in which we're steeped in all of these wonderful ideas? What do you think was the bigger draw for him?
I think it was both. My first grade was in a one-room schoolhouse. There was 3 in my class. It was at the end.
Wait. 3 in your class?
Yes.
In a one room?
One room. And there was about 20 kids in that class, 1 through 8th grade. But and then I got transferred or consolidated actually to another one-room schoolhouse my second year. The third year we got consolidated into the Birch Tree school system, and I graduated in a class of 25 out of that high school. I was taking shorthand to get enough credits to graduate by the state standards.
That's great. I just keep on thinking about that one room and 25 students ranging from grades 1 to 8, you said? I have to tell you, from a pedagogical nightmare, pedagogical perspective, that is a total nightmare for a teacher to have to deal with so many levels. How did your teacher do that?
Well, what they do, I think, one, it's very difficult, but they try to find students in each one of the grades that are moving faster than others, and they also help the teacher to...
so the teacher basically uses the older ones to kind of like, you take that kid right there. Well, which I think would help with maturity a bit.
Oh, yeah. That's not a panacea for solving our educational problem. No. But the more times you work with something, the better chance you have of really learning it. So those older students, if they're going back and helping the younger students and going through all of that again and again and again in this process, it helps, I think, build their foundation. But the one-room schoolhouse, didn't have foreign languages. It had a basic science class, basic math, basic English, and basic history. And that's about the extent of it.
Wow. Teaching is learning twice over. I'm also thinking, so this gives me a couple great ideas on the parenting aspect of, teaching kids about how to deal with money. I think that, so I've got 4 kids. Mm-hmm. It's wonderful to think of each one of them as being a resource to train the other. Mm-hmm. Because they all have various strengths. It would be wonderful to be able to kind of teach. Now I'm going to teach each of my kids about this. Now I'm going to teach them all about that. But they're all at such different levels. And so my experience as a parent is probably closer to that one-room classroom than it is to, having my own class. And I have taught, having a class full of people who are all at relatively the same educational level. What did that mean for you when you made the transition to college? Was that like a real shock? Because, you went to Mizzou?
No, I went to Southwest Missouri State University in Springfield, not Missouri State. Well, it was a real shock from the standpoint you're coming from that environment and you're dumped into a completely different environment. And at that point in time, anything below a 2 point, you were on probation. And about 67% of the kids coming into college ended up on probation. And so I was trying to make sure I didn't end up on probation. And I didn't. But it was hard work. I had to start out taking some pretty remedial classes in areas because I didn't have any real background in those from where I came from. But I had tremendous help from a lot of different professors. In fact, one individual was one of my poli-sci professors, and our second son is named after him.
When you think about stories from your childhood about learning about business, what are some of the stories, and many, what are some of the stories that jump out the most to you where you had these aha moments that have guided you?
Well, probably my parents again. My dad is as straight arrow as you can get. There is no gray area. You're either doing what's appropriate or not. My mom had a big heart. She never met a stranger. And she came from a big city environment to a rural community. We didn't even have indoor plumbing when I moved there.
See, that would have been a no game. If I'd been born in like the 14th century, I'd be like, nah, I'm out of here. Well, I'm going to the future.
In fact, her mother, when she came down, when my mom and dad moved down, she wanted to go back to Kansas City. That was no place because they were not the wealthy in Kansas City, but they were not the poor because her family had been one of the original commission companies at the Kansas City Stockyards, and that's where mom and dad had met. When he had been asked to leave the farm because he wouldn't do what he was supposed to, he went to work at the Kansas City Stockyards for one of the companies there, and that was mom's family's company, and that's how they met. But mom said no. I married him. I will stay here. And she was not accepted by her dad's family for several years. In fact, it was, I think, 10 years before my grandfather ever walked in our house.
Wow.
And we lived a quarter of a mile apart. If he wanted something, he would come out and honk and go outside. But I never heard my mom ever be critical of him or his wife or anything else. And when he was dying, it was my mom that took care of him more than anybody else, and they became very close before he passed away.
Those stories always amaze me of people who have their distances, but then later on in life really draw together. I've seen that a couple times, and it's always very inspiring. And evidently that meant a lot to you.
Oh, very much. No matter what the difficulty is, my mom and dad said you respect your grandparents, and that was the rule. It wasn't any gray area here. They are your grandparents. You respect them as your grandparents.
Do you feel like you were entrepreneurial in your personality? Tell me a little bit about your kind of disposition as a child. Definitely a leader. I can see that. And it sounds like your brothers had caught on to the fact that you had a little bit of a kind of a dreaminess, like, you wanted out there, you wanted to go do something.
My wife says at times, Bob, I don't know what planet you come from, But I'm never satisfied with keeping things as they are because things can always be improved no matter what they are. And I feel like I have had the best mentors that someone could have in politics in our state. You can have your differences, but they ought to be based on principles and values that you have. Yeah. And sadly today, unfortunately, I think money is playing too much of a dominating role in trying to determine what your values are. And I'm not sure that's particularly very good for our culture or our country.
Do you think that there are ways to teach our kids about money early on that allow for them to not be so heavily influenced by it while still being savvy with it.
They ought to be taught ethics at the same time they're being taught about money.
Yeah.
I know very ethical people, and then I know others that aren't ethical at all, and it's all about what I need to do to get ahead, and I'll step on anybody and everybody to get there. And I just don't think that's good for your society, nor do I think it's good for raising your children or your family or anything else.
So there has to be some sort of values instruction, otherwise everything's out of whack. Yeah. Gotcha.
There's got to be a moral foundation, because any culture with no morality, I think, is destined to be a disaster. And I'll just use the Nazis of Germany.
Yeah.
When you're totally void of any moral foundation, then everything is possible for you to do and justified from your standpoint to do. And I think that's wrong.
Yeah. Do you have any more stories from your childhood where you experienced something and it really changed the way that you look at business? It really affects the way that you work as an individual today.
Yes and no, I guess. But as you know from the discussion, I don't come from a lot of wealth. And every year, if we wanted something, we had a lot of walnut trees. And so we went out and picked up a lot of walnuts, and we used that to buy the baseball glove that I was talking about or anything else we really wanted. I mean, my mom and dad made sure that we were always dressed properly and looked nice no matter where we went, and they tried to help us all they could. But if we wanted something outside of that realm of what was possible, we could do that. And that's where we would go out and we'd pick up the walnuts when they fell off the trees and pay for those. I had a couple cows with the FFA, and so I got they were milk cows, and so I got the money from that to go into my college fund for college and things like that. So in a rural environment like that, the family has to work and be close for everybody to succeed.
Yeah. I like what you're saying about kind of the families needing to draw together for their collective success. And you also had some points about the walnuts, but basically your association with the things you wanted that were outside of what felt like you could get were tied to this ability to work. Well, if I really want this, I'm going to go out, I'm going to work, I'm going to get it.
Yeah.
I have been really delighted to talk to you. I want to ask you one more question. What is your very favorite charitable cause?
Save the Children. I've been involved with them for over 40 years. I'm not a big spender, but I started as a college student. I think it was a college student, putting money into that program. I've been involved with the American Legion, Missouri Boys State and Girls State program in all different capacities for over 40 years. Believe in that program very well. In fact, many of my very best friends in life come out of that program, and more of them are Republicans and Democrats, and me being a Democrat. It's those type of things. The thing that I think my parents taught more than anything else is you never look up and you never look down at anybody. You look at who they are, and you try to treat everybody the same and give them the same respect that you'd want to have yourself.
You've been doing these delegations with these children from the boys' state and girls' state. What kind of an impact do you think that will have on them as people and as professionals?
I think it can be really a turning point in their lives. I mean, in fact, I've been talking to the ones that just came back, and it's amazing to me how many of these students say, that trip to China was a game changer for me.
Yes.
Because they come from either rural or urban America. Probably most of them at that age have not traveled outside the United States at all. And so their view of the world is really in their community and maybe in their block, in their neighborhood. And for the first time, they're taken out to a completely different culture in a completely different part of the world. And they're seeing, and what I found is that those families with children in China care about their children just as much as families here care about our children.
Yes.
And so if we can come together and think of each other as all of us want to do what's best for our kids, invest in their future, we can find common ground. We can have disagreements. We can disagree about policy issues or anything else, but fundamentally, we both want our children to be successful. And how they are successful is working with each other. And if you help shape their thoughts about what is possible and achievable from a global perspective early in life, then they can put all of that into play and practice to be better leaders.
Thank you so much, Governor Holden. It has been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, thank you.
Everybody else, thank you for listening. We hoped you enjoyed the interview and found useful ideas about things you can do with your kids. Be sure to check the show notes at www.choosethenickel.com for links to names, books, and other resources we discussed in today's show. Also, please subscribe to our newsletter and visit our contact page where you can give us feedback. We invite you to share Choose the Nickel with your friends and join us in our quest to give kids financial freedom.